just begun. Shaking the ground with the force of pulse and guns.
Hi all, welcome to HD Scale Model Armour. Today we're going to be doing a little tutorial on how to do wood. So we're going to take a grey crate and we're going to give it that wood look. So how do we do it? Let's start. We're going to use 4 basic colours and we're also going to use a wash. This one is Citadel's Agrax Earthshade, but you can use sepia wash or a black wash. For this purposes I'm going to cheat and I'm going to use a hairdryer, but ideally what I would suggest is you allow each stage of the painting to dry. So what's the first stage? Well, the first stage, what we need to do is we need to get a base colour down, and with that we use wood to 71077 by Vallejo Model Air. We're going to use a nice flat brush straight out of the bottle, and what we're going to do is we're going to just put a light coat all over the wood. We don't want to have it too thick, because if we do it too thick we're going to fill in all of the detail ridges, all of the cuts and the details that are within that resin that gives it its wood effect. All that's going to get filled in by thick paint, which isn't what we want. What we want to do is we just want to get a colour on it, and it's quite easy to kind of just slot the paint on and not pay attention to where it's pooling. Don't let it pool in these areas where you've got ridges. Don't let it pool like that. Just wipe it back out with the brush, get colour on there. It doesn't have to be totally covered. I mean, it's going to come out opaque, that's fine, but just get it covered, all the creases everywhere, with this wood colour. And like I say, just stop it from pooling. Doesn't take too long, especially not on a crate this size. Just needs a couple of minutes. And as I say, I haven't thinned this paint. This is literally just as it's coming out of the Model Air bottle. If you're using the model colour, then I would suggest that you thin that probably 50-50, ideally with water or with Vallejo's airbrush thinner, because that paint will be too thick and you're just going to fill up them details like we said before. So there we are, nearly finished, all done. And that's it, that's all we need. We don't need a great deal of paint on it, we just need a good covering. So let's go and dry that and we'll be back. Okay. So the next colour we're going to do is going to be the Vallejo medium brown. Again, I'm using Model Air because it's already thinned, but you can use the other paints as we've said. So we're going to take a little tiny bit of this. Now, instead of doing it like a dry brush, bring in a little bit of tissue here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to dab off a little bit. I'm not going to dry it off like I do a dry brush, because I don't want to do that. And what I want to do is I want to just lay some of the brown into some of the edges. As you can see, I'm not putting the brown, I'm not doing the brown all over the part itself. What I'm doing is I'm just putting in what I call the pre-chipping, which is going to emphasize the chipping that I put on afterwards. With everything, be random. Don't see this here, I've got a straight line. Don't really want a straight line, because a straight line is going to show up, especially when the other bits of paint are applied. It will show up like a sore thumb. So just any straight lines that you get, just dig them out. And again, I've just been random we've got some brown on. Okay, let's let that dry. Next step. Okay guys, next step. What we want to do is we want to take some light brown. And we're also going to change over and we're going to go to a small brush. So we're going to go to a little brush now. Okay, and what this is your chipping and your highlights. And this is almost the same as when you do your chipping on an AFV or a tank or something. Wood is exactly the same. So what we're going to do is just going to do some random chipping. Okay, and what that does is, strangely, it emphasises the darker areas as well as chipping the wood. Wood's a natural product, and most of the time, not all the time, but most of the time, wood, when it gets used, it's either painted or it's stained, and the stain only goes so far in. And I say that most of the time because sometimes stains do go a lot further than others. But let's say, for instance, this was a stained wood crate, and then it gets chipped, and what happens is that natural wood colour shows through. However, don't use the wood, use a much lighter colour, because these are going to be very, very tiny chips, and you don't want to use the wood colour because it's just too stark. So you use a light brown, which really does show up very well. And bearing in mind we're going to be muting all of these down in the next few stages, so if you look at it at the moment and you think, wow, that is just really bright and looks odd, don't worry about it too much, because you're going to be losing an awful lot of this brightness. This contrast is going to get taken down. But this is one of the main things that people forget when they do wood, is wood gets damaged, it gets bruised, it gets chipped up. There's many things that hit against wood, you know, people, other bits of wood, other objects, you know, so you've got to pay as much attention as you have with your armour or your model as you have with wood. And again, exactly the same as the old famous Big Gymnast says, just random. And do scratches as well, because scratches happen. The wood gets gouged and scratched. And especially keep in mind, you know, think logically. What's going to get the most scratches? The most scratches are going to happen on the areas of wood that are going to be more exposed, i.e. these ribs. Ribs are going to get scratched up way quicker than the inside of the actual crate wood itself. That being said, don't kind of disregard the inside of the crate wood. Make sure that you do get some in there. The other thing we're going to do with this colour is we're just going to put some nail holes, and all that is a little tiny dot over each of these. And although it's light, it just emphasises kind of where they've nailed the whole thing together. Just gives a good representation. And again, even though you probably think, well, heck, I can't see that, don't be fooled, because when it's all finished and then you start looking at it real close, little details like this are the ones that your eye picks up on. And you think, oh, I didn't see those before. So there you go. So there's our highlights done. Okay, let's go to the next stage. Okay, our next stage, we're going to go to the wash. I'm going to use the Agrax Earth shade. And what I'm going to use is my little brush again. And what I want to do is I want to firstly, straight out the bottle, and I'm using it almost like a pin wash. Plenty on there, don't be scared about it. It's not like when you're doing your AFVs where you've got to try and get it only in the little tiny gap that you've got. With this, it doesn't really matter too much, and in fact actually you want to encourage it a little bit, but you want some bleed out from that edge. As you can see there, I've got some bleed out, and the reason for that is, as we keep saying, wood is a natural product. It will wick when people stain wood will wick a little bit, so you're almost depicting that wicking effect. But not only that, you know, dirt, any accumulation that you get, we're also trying to depict that as well. So you're doing a multitude of things with the wash. But if you notice, I'm not going all over. I'm not going all over the crate with the wash, and there's a reason for that. If you literally just go all over the crate, you basically take away that effect that you're trying to get. You know, some of you know, remember, washes aren't washed. That's a filter. We're almost using this wash like a very thin paint, and in fact, if you don't have sepia wash, if you don't have a black wash or this Agrax Earthshade, then it's quite easy to use something like a black brown and really water it down. Now get it nice and thin, and then you'll get exactly the same kind of results with your thinned out paint as you will with a wash. Remember to do all of these ribs in the edges as well. And some really good bleed out in various areas. Again, we're going with this random thing. So now in some areas, kick it up a notch, you know, really bleed it out, and in others don't. Get a much more eye-pleasing result if you are random. So that's the first stage. Let's let this dry and we'll come back. Okay, so we've dried all that lot off. Now we're going to go back with the second, saying everything we've just done and just adding in just a little bit more over the rest of the crate. Why are we doing it like this? Well, we needed the tonal variation that comes from doing the wash, and the reason that we needed that variation of doing the wash is because washes tend to flatten out with their colour, especially when doing stuff like this. They'll embed themselves into the grooves and the recesses, and you lose the colour on the top. So what happens is you just struggle, you fight. It's much easier just to do the first layer and get it all into your edges, and then come back and do this staining of the wood with your second one afterwards, because where it lays over the areas that you've done on the first stage, it will go darker, so it will emphasize what you've already done on the first stages, and it works very well with wood. So we're just giving it a little bit of a random fill here, making sure that I get all of those grooves, bit of staining over the top. Doesn't take long and she's done. Dry it off And now we're into the final stages. Okay, we're going back to the final stages now. We're going to swap our brush out. We're going to get ourselves a nice semi-soft brush with a rough edge on the end of it. We need our paper. And we're going to go back, firstly, with the wood colour. Some wood. We're really going to dry this out, like this. We're just going to dry brush just a little on the edges, in various areas. And because we're going back with the wood, what this is doing is it's almost like when you use oils. And as you can see, there's really hardly anything going on there. It is literally just changing the colour just slightly. And that's all we want to do. We really don't want to go and lather it all on there. We just want to change the colour. So that's the first stage. We don't need to leave it to dry because it is literally dry brushing. So now what we're going to do is our last stage. We'll go back, dark brown again, load the brush up, dry her off on the paper, and now dry brush exactly the same way. And what this will do is it will just pull in all those tones that you needed. Now this isn't dry brushing like you do on your AFVs, because really when you dry brush your AFVs you just want to just get the edges. You know, with this we're using a brush that's kind of rounded on the end, rough on the end, and we're almost digging the paint, the dried paint in. And that is our finished wood. As you can see, it's gone from being grey to a nice stained dirty crate. From here you can probably put weathering powders on it. You can then accentuate your weathering as you want to do it, however you see fit. But that's how to get your basic wood colour. Hope you've enjoyed it. Thank you for joining us. See you again soon.